Hi, NASCAR fantasy racing fans. Welcome to our On Pit Road. Dan Beaver's NASCAR fantasy pit stop on Pit Row. I'm Charlie Turner, of course, joined by NASCAR fantasy racing guru Dan Beaver. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. Think the weather's about to break here in Central Texas. It's been hot for a couple of days, and quite frankly, my air conditioner needs the break.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get that. I hope you get your wish there. We've had a very, very mild several days here in the Midwest. Evenings down into the low 50s, and the days are topping out mid 70s. It's been beautiful.
Oof.
Uh, so you can't complain about that. It'd be a great if that weather holds for where we go this week for the Sprint Cup Series, Pocono in the mountains of Pennsylvania. I think that'd be pretty neat for that racetrack. I don't know about. I don't think there's anything predicted for rain, so maybe we don't get a rain delay for a change, and we can just go get this 400-mile race in and out.
Yeah, especially at Pocono, that track's got to be a bear to dry.
Dry it out,
No
yeah.
banking to wash for the rain to run off in 2.5 miles. By the time you get to the tunnel turn, you're basically in Philadelphia. It's just that's got to be a bear.
Yeah, so we're coming off of a race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway that a track that probably is the closest comparable to Pocono, at least in my mind. Is that right? I mean, is that what you look at as much as any place when you're looking at Pocono? Plus, I mean, obviously we had a race at Pocono 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think you can group these three races together: the Pocono 400, the Pennsylvania 400, and the Brickyard 400. They're all anybody that is runs well in one of those is going to run well probably in all three. And then you've got the added benefit of the Camping World 301 2 weeks ago on another flat track. It was a mile, but a lot of the drivers that ran strong at New Hampshire, regardless of where they finished, ran strong again in Indy. I think I made that point last week. You're going to want to not look at the raw finishes because people like Denny Hamlin, Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick had fuel mileage strategies that didn't play out, but they ran strong, so they're probably going to run strong again. And that was true. All three of those drivers had stout finishes last week at Indy, and they're going to keep that momentum this week going into Pocono.
Well, we're solidly into the second half of the season. We've got about we got 6 races to go before we get to the chase. Does that play at all into? Let's talk in terms of salary cap games for now. Does that play at all into your decisions here on who you pick, or are you just you're just roster managing at this point? I don't know.
I think you got to be aware where you are in the season. Last week, Jimmy Johnson's anemic performance at Indy. The week before that, his tire problems at New Hampshire signified that he is taking risks. And so long as he's taking those risks, he's not going to be a good pick. On He's not going to be a good pick. You just don't know what mistakes they're going to make. You don't know what's going to happen to them. So you've got to. I think you got to leave him. Even though Johnson's got the capability of winning any week you come to the track, you got to leave him in the garage until the chase begins. Jeff Gordon's gamble 2 weeks ago at New Hampshire called him into question, but he got it right at Indy and won. So it's going to be kind of long races for anyone who starts one of those drivers that's locked into the chase, and you just have to wait and see what actually comes of it. You got to still kind of do it by the numbers. You don't know how the strategy is going to play out. Pocono is also one of those tracks where even though it's prone to strategy, the cream rises to the top. You treat it like a road course race. You count back from the end. You can pit and not lose a lap. All of those things factor in. So everybody kind of has the same type of strategy. You don't have a lot of people like Denny Hamlin who's trying to roll the dice last week at Indy, and he was the only one on that particular strategy. So you get through that final caution, and everybody's about where they're supposed to be. Then they just race to the end. So this is a track that's fairly predictable in that sense. And the strategy, it's usually not a fuel mileage race at the very end. So the strategy doesn't always impact the finish, although it's always part of the story.
So is this one of those? I know we've had several races in the last month or so when we looked at these things and you kind of made your decisions in the salary cap games. You started at the back of the field at the cheap guys first, picked the right ones of those, and then moved up and back. Is it what are you thinking this week at Pocono?
But this week, because it's more or less predictable, I think you start with the marquee drivers. Uh, Jeff Gordon is the winningest driver at Pocono. He got his his sixth win a couple of years back, passing Bill Elliott with 5. He's usually strong, and he's usually stronger in this race than he is in June. Last year's second place finish and the victory, I believe, the year before that, are show you just how strong he is in the second race. For some reason, they're not far enough apart on the schedule that weather plays a part. It's like he gets the butterflies out of his stomach or whatever, the problems out of the way in the first race, and can really excel in this one. So you're looking at, I think, marquee drivers to begin with. You're looking at the more expensive drivers, and you kind of fill in at the back. There aren't a lot of dark horses here. Aren't a lot of part-time drivers at Pocono ever. It's kind of far from the maddening crowd. To bastardize a Thomas Hardy book there.
Yeah, I like the literary references in a sports talk show. That's good stuff.
Yeah, I yam what I yam. It's kind of far from. It's out of the limelight, so you're not getting all those drivers that you get at some of these other places. We've got a 43-car field, 2 of which are late entries, 2 of which may start and park. Mike Bliss almost certainly will. That third Tommy Baldwin racing car that has Dave Blaney, I think, behind the wheel this week, probably won't start and park. Probably isn't up to running overly competitively. So you don't have dark horses here. Your dark horses are people like Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon, who are probably fairly expensive. You're going to look for drivers, maybe a Reed Sorensen, who has a good record of finishing better than he starts, but he's going to get only a finish in the 30s, or a Justin Allgaier who's going to get finishes probably somewhere in the 20s, and that's going to make him a good value. So you're in a salary cap game, you're probably looking at, in a 5-man lineup, 2 marquee drivers and 3 drivers that are in the bottom half of the salary cap group. But get those 2 marquee drivers, because they're the ones that are going to get you those top 5s, and probably who's going to help you win your league this week.
Well, you mentioned a couple of marquee drivers earlier in the show. Who else would you would not predict to have, that you wouldn't pick, I guess? Anybody else to stay away from there that is it acknowledged marquee driver and might be a name that somebody who doesn't follow this as closely as you do might just naturally pick and you think is a bad idea?
I think you got to question Denny Hamlin's value this week.
I would think particularly with the penalty without his car chief and crew chief that would be a case.
I think that if you were on the fence, I think that's one of the things that would knock you off the fence and get you to drop him. But also in the past 3 years, he hasn't done well in this particular race. I think he wrecked last year to finish 43rd. In 2012, he finished 29th. In 2011, he finished 15th. Meanwhile, he's had good runs in the June race. Again, there's no reason for that. The track doesn't change from race to race. But when those kind of patterns start to poke up, when you start to see patterns like that, you got to kind of wonder about it, and it puts the doubt in the back of your mind. Then you come up, you find that Denny Hamlin's without his crew chief and his car chief, and you think, yeah, maybe I'll wait and see how he does here, and then we'll think about starting him at Richmond and Martinsville later in the year. Kyle Busch, it's always dangerous to start. He drives on the razor's edge, so he's either going to finish in the top 5 or he's going to hit the wall and finish badly. He had the incident with Casey Kane earlier this year.
It was here too.
So even though saying to avoid him, if you replay it and Kyle Busch is standing in victory lane, I look like an idiot, but I still won't put him on my team because you just don't know what you're going to get out of him most weeks. And I don't want to run the risk of having him wreck. So he's another driver I would avoid that would be one of those marquee guys.
All right. Anything else we need to cover on salary cap games before we move on to our weekly talk about Yahoo Sports game?
Probably one of the better values in the game because he's been so uneven all year is a Kurt Busch. He is erratic about every place he goes, especially this year with some of the problems with Stewart-Haas Racing. But he has 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s in his last 6 starts here at Pocono. And, of course, to get 6 starts, you got to go back a little bit further for him because he missed the June race after an altercation with a pit reporter. Right. So if he stays out of trouble, if he doesn't hit the wall and he doesn't get into a fight with a member of the media, he could be a good value.
Yeah, I mean, Kurt's just one of those tantalizing drivers. You know, you see the talent jumps out, and you remember these flashes when he's running up front and people talking about him, then all of a sudden he disappears. You kind of tend to forget about that stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, he's maybe if you got, I would tend to pick him here probably myself, but that's me. I'm not the expert.
And maybe one more thing before we move on to the Yahoo game. If you've been following me for a couple of years, you know I kind of bounce around sometime. I've been at NASCAR.com. I've been on AOL. I've been on Fox Sports, and now I've got a new gig with Roto World, which is an NBC property. So check out rotoworld.com. I've got one column there right now. Probably that'll extend to a couple of columns a little bit later. A lot of the driver news that you'll see there is me. If you know how I write, probably pretty easy to figure out which ones I'm writing and which ones someone else is writing. But we've got one more column in the mix now with Roto World. So I want to give them a shout out, and anybody that wants to see what I'm doing ought to go there and check out the features.
That's good news. We'll put a link up to that when this video is over with, and we put it up on the YouTube page, so people will be able to go directly there from there or from our On Pit Road website. Also, Dan, of course, you can read his weekly column about Yahoo's fantasy game, the Yahoo Sports fantasy game. It's always one of the best fantasy articles. I think the best fantasy article, bar none, every week. So check him out there. And then we were also lucky to have Dan and I are partnering up for On Pit Road Magazine, and Dan has unique fantasy content for the magazine as well. So if you get a chance, go to the App Store or download the app is free. The On Pit Road Magazine app is free, totally free. If you subscribe, you get 2 months free of the magazine. So that should be 4 issues of the magazine. So check it out, enjoy it, let us know what you think, and we want to make that thing better all the time. So we need your input from that. So. All right, let's go talk about the Yahoo game this week. Where do you start? You start with yours. Is this one of those races where you got to take Dillon or Larson, or do you go with somebody? Is there anybody down there in that C class that you can save an allocation for those other guys with here?
C is slim pickings. This is one of the times that you've saved an allocation for those 2 marquee drivers because there is no other option. They will, unless they wreck, unless they blow up, they're going to finish first and second.
Yeah, Larson, they both finished top 10 at Indy last week too, so they're on a roll on this type of track.
Mm-hmm. And Larson's going to finish better than Dillon unless something really weird happens.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what you're going to get from that. The challenge then shifts from figuring out who's going to run well, who's going to finish best and second best, to what are the implications going forward. So I preach allocation management a lot. This is one of those times where you've got to pay attention to the allocation management. On flat tracks, short and long flat tracks, Larson's beaten Dillon every race except at Martinsville. There I think Dillon finished 15th and Larson finished a little bit further back. In the last 3 races, last 3 flat track races, Larson swept the top 10. He has a strong finish at Pocono, New Hampshire, and Indy. But Dillon's been closing that gap each week. Let me pull the exact numbers up here in front of me. Okay. My computer crashed, and when it did, it took some of my notes. But wait, no. There we go. Okay. So Dillon's been closing that gap at Phoenix, He finished 24th to Larson's 20th. At Richmond, he finished 27th to Larson's 16th, 17th to 5th at Pocono, 14th, 3rd at New Hampshire, and then last week 10th to 7th at Indy. So he's getting better progressively as well, and if that progression continues, we're probably looking at maybe a top 5, top 6 place finish for Larson, and only 1 or 2 positions further back for Dillon. In my mind, that makes Dillon the starter because Larson's already been the top points producer in Yahoo's Group C more than 9 times, I think 10 times so far this season. So this is a good time to start Dillon, even if he finishes second to Larson, and he might not. He might finish out of him. Both of them could have problems. But even if he finishes behind him, he's not going to finish so far behind him that it doesn't make him a good allocation management play. After that, your next best driver is Justin Allgaier, and he's going to need a little bit of a miracle to finish in the top 15. His flat track record this year has been pretty consistently in the 20s. You can expect another 20th place finish. And if you're down to your last 2 allocations on Larson and Dillon for some reason, then you might want to roll the dice and hope that Allgaier continues to improve as well and gets a top 15 finish. So in Group C, I think that's where your choices begin and end. Larson, Dillon, and maybe Allgaier. After that, no reason to even think about the other guys.
When you talk about allocation management, especially for these guys that are lower down the, they're not the A drivers and maybe not the top 2 or 3 picks in the B class. We're getting close to the chase now. So once these drivers that are obviously going to qualify for the chase are in there, the chase finishes tend to be, in my mind, guys that qualify for the chase tend to finish at the top of those last 10 races. Does that come into play at all now? Do you save anything for I'm trying to think of a good example, maybe a Kyle Busch who is obviously going to be in the chase? Do you think maybe his average finish will be higher once the chase starts? Because it seems like some of the drivers who don't qualify kind of defer to the chase qualifiers in those last 10 races.
Sometimes there's always 1 or 2 drivers that have something to prove and want to finish 13th in the standings and prove that they should have been there. 13th in the standings when it was a 12-man chase. So that's going to come to play too. Someone that misses the chase, if Tony Stewart misses the chase, he's going to have something to prove, and he'll probably be one of the best values in the last 10 races for that reason. We touched on this a little bit earlier in another show. I think Jimmy Johnson is not a driver that you would want to. He's definitely going to improve in the chase because he's rolling the dice too often this year. These last 6 races, they're going to continue to experiment, and you just don't know what you're going to get from him. So he's going to do better once we get to the playoffs. Traditionally has. Last year was a bit of an exception, one of the past couple of years he's had a bit of an exception in the last 10 races. But that is his time to shine. So right now I'd put him on the bench and not think about starting him until Chicagoland rolls around. Then I'd just use him up after that. So yeah, I think you got to be aware of where you are in the season. You got to be aware of who's got what to lose, and make that part of your handicapping formula.
All right, so I'll get out of your way now, and you can tell everybody what they should do with their Yahoo team.
Group A, there are always good drivers in Group A, and you don't get into the allocation management worry there as you do elsewhere. And right now, this is pretty typical. You've got a number of drivers that have earned top points in Group A throughout the year, and it's fairly evenly matched. Jeff Gordon last week was one of the top points producers for the 4th time this year. Above him, you've got Jimmy Johnson, Jimmy Johnson's been a top point producer 3 times. Kevin Harvick 5 times. But then you've got Dale Earnhardt, Matt Kenseth, Kurt Busch, and Kyle Busch, all of whom at one point or another have been a top points producer. So you don't have to worry about the allocation management nearly as much there as you do elsewhere. And in this case, I'm probably going to I've ranked Dale Earnhardt Jr. tops because Hendrick Motorsports is strong. When he was with DEI, I think he had top 5 finishes in only about 30% of his starts. With Hendrick Motorsports, he has top 10s in more than those top 10s. He has top 10s in more than 50% of his starts. So the addition of the set of notes from his teammates has really played into his hand and made him a much better value at Pocono than he was in the past. So Earnhardt is probably my A driver. And then Kurt Busch, I think it might be time to put him on at least on your provisional roster and see how he looks. If he looks dominant in practice and qualification, there's no guarantee that he won't implode during the race. But this is a track where he's got a good, consistent record that we talked about when we were mentioning salary cap games. So he's the driver who probably would be a second on my roster, although I've got Jeff Gordon ranked a little bit higher than him. Jeff Gordon's got a good shot at winning back-to-back races. He's the winningest driver at Pocono. He's now the 3rd winningest driver. He's the winningest driver at Indy. So these two tracks are similar, and I think he's got a good shot at winning again. And if he misses, a good solid top 5 finish. So if you've got plenty of allocations for him, I think he's a relatively safe pick. Dropping down to driver to avoid in Group A, I'd probably avoid Matt Kenseth. Has not been a particularly strong track for him throughout his year, throughout his career. I think he has either 4 or 5 consecutive 20-something finishes, 2 of which have been crash-induced, but that's part of the game as well. Clint Bowyer is another driver I wouldn't particularly trust at Indy to score top 10. He's a good, consistent top 15 finisher, but the consistency is so much that you can almost guarantee he's going to finish somewhere in that 11th to 15th place range, and that's going to keep him from being one of the top values in Group A. Make him a starter in Group B, but unfortunately he's not there. So you drop down to Group B. I think Ryan Newman is one of your best, most consistent picks there. This is a track that he's always done well on. He enters with a 4-race top 10 streak, of which a 7th this June was his worst. But a 7th place finish still makes him one of the top 3 or 4 points producers, regardless of what goes on ahead of him. He's got a top 15 streak going all the way back to August of 2008. So if he misses, he's still going to finish probably somewhere in the top 15, and you're not going to lose a lot of points. So Newman is definitely a starter there. Tony Stewart, it's been good. He's probably going to finish somewhere in that 6th to 15th place range as well. I don't think he's got a shot at winning. It's been a while since he's got a top 5 at Pocono. I think he lost his greatest opportunity to win an oval race last week at Indy. Watkins Glen is coming up next week, so he's got another good shot to win there. If you put him on your roster this week and forget to change it, you're not going to be too upset when we roll into Watkins Glen, because he's probably going to have a chance to win or finish in the top 5 there. So he's my other driver other than the Penske guys. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski have both been nearly perfect on flat track races, except for a blown engine and a crash. Joey Logano's got a perfect streak of top 5s. If not for contact in the pits with the 2 Busch brothers, Brad Keselowski would have a perfect record of top 5s or top 10s on flat tracks. So they're going to be there, but you only want to start them if you've got plenty of allocations for one or the other. Probably still want to put them on your provisional roster because they continue to be the class of the field where qualification is concerned. Joey Logano has advanced to the final round of qualifying 16 times, which is pretty much every standard qualification that we've had, other than Richmond, where it was set by practice speeds because qualification was rained out. The restrictor plate super speedways, he's qualified for everything else. And then Brad Keselowski's qualified, advanced to that last round of qualification in 14 out of the races. So they could get the pole. Logano already has 2 poles here, one from the pole once. So I think they need to be on your provisional roster. just in the hopes that you get qualification bonus points in the Yahoo game.
All right, there you have it. I think that pretty well winds it up this week, talking about the Pocono 400 and the fantasy racing implications for this. Any last thoughts, Dan, before we check out this week?
Pennsylvania 400. The Pocono 400 at this point would be very easy to handicap.
I hit it right at the beginning of the show, too.
I've gone back to using pretty much just traditional names at some point. No, this is accept the ease of this race, I think, is the final words. Don't overthink it. This is a fairly easy race to handicap. Next week on the road course, another fairly easy race to handicap, although things don't always work out. And then you're going to get to those final 4 races of the regular season on tracks like Atlanta. You got a number of tracks coming up that are going to be kind of hard to Bristol's in there, Michigan's in there. Yeah. You're gonna have to put your brain to work when you get to those final 4 races.
All right, again, make sure you check out Dan's new new fantasy writing gig at rotoworld.com. Read his regular weekly column at yahoosports.com. And, of course, check out our new project, our new joint project on Pit Road Magazine. You can go to the App Store on iTunes and download that app for free and get a couple months of the magazine for free and let us know what you think. It's we're real proud of it. And it's going to just get better every issue. So I'm Charlie Turner. You follow me on Twitter at OnPitRoad. Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race. And we'll be back next week to talk about the next race, which is at Michigan. No, it's at Watkins Glen. It'll be the big road course race at Watkins Glen. That's next week. So signing off this week. Thanks again for joining us for Dan Beaver's Fantasy Racing Pit Stop.